Hello and welcome to Absolutely Not. Thank y'all so much for being here. My name is Kay Stroll. My pronouns are they, them, and you can learn more about me at www.kstroll.com. Real quick, if you appreciate the work that I do here or elsewhere, please visit the Support the Mission page of my website. There are several options to choose from to support my work, so please choose one. The keywords for this episode are internalized transphobia, authenticity, and community pressure. I am already about to cry. I encourage y'all to look up the definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions you carry with you on a daily basis. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by Headspace. Headspace has one mission: to improve the health and happiness of the world through meditation, sleep, stress, and mindfulness. Find out more about Headspace at the link in the show notes. Today's episode is titled, I'm Not Looking for Feedback. I'm excited to talk about this with our amazing special guest today, Ethan Levine, he, him, his. Ethan is a sociologist, anti-violence advocate, and an award-winning speaker on interpersonal violence and the LGBTQ plus communities. He has lived experience of sexual violence, dating violence, stalking, and antisemitic violence. He is transgender, queer, and Ashkenazi Jewish. Ethan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks. I'm really excited to talk with you.
I have already stated that I'm about to cry, and the reason I'm crying is because we kind of talked about this. There's always an air around transgender people, but right now the air is super heavy. And I just wanted to acknowledge that before we get into it, that this might get way heavier than we anticipate. And I hope it does, because people need to know that we breathe heavy air every single fucking day. But I'd love to ask you, who are you telling you don't need feedback from?
Yes, thank you. That is something I wish I could go back and say to a few people. And if this is all right, maybe I should actually start by clarifying who I'm not saying that to. So there are some contexts where I am always open to and seek out feedback, right? So how I can do my work better, how I can show up more meaningfully for the people in my life, for communities I'm a part of, as an ally for communities I'm not part of. And the last one I'll throw out there is how I can recognize when I've caused harm and do better. But when it comes to who I am as a human being and how I share that with the world, a lot of people have tried to tell me that I'm doing that wrong, or that I should do that how they do. And to them, I would like to say, not looking for feedback.
All right. I'm so glad that you clarified that with us, because I believe that we both know that feedback is needed, especially in the fields that we work in, because we want to create safer spaces for people. But that last bit that you talked about is people asking you to do you how they do. How has that happened to you, or has that happened recently?
It feels like a constant, especially around transness, right? So I'll give some earlier examples. I first recognized that I'm a transgender person 18 years ago, which is wild, and started living as Ethan 18 years ago. One of the first things that happened to me was a lot of loss. I was fired from a role at a sexual assault response center, explicitly for that reason, right? Where I'd been for a year and a half, had some personal relationship struggles. So I really wanted to seek out trans community spaces. And there was a local trans masculine support group that officially was for, so anyone female assigned at birth who was questioning their gender or identified as anything other than a girl or a woman, just that's your birth assignment. You've moved somewhere else, or you're thinking of maybe moving somewhere else. And in that space, I faced a lot of policing, frankly, around how to be transgender. One particular night, this feels a little weird since this is mostly a podcast, but I want to take my ponytail out for this story, if that's okay, because hair is such a big part of my trans life. Okay, so this is what I'm supposed to look like as a big heavy metal person. When I first came out as trans, there was a lot of pressure to look as kind of gender normative as possible. I had cut my hair short because other trans men told me to do that. It was not a good look for me, but I was trying. And I had one meeting where I was kind of recognized for doing that well, which was already weird, right? And then another meeting, I had let it grow out to, I don't know, maybe an inch, inch and a half. And this self-appointed leader of that space spent 5 minutes tearing into me. He told me that that was unacceptable, that I needed to be more careful. And the phrase that has stayed with me for 18 years was, he told me that kind of decision was going to, quote, get me ma'amed. As though that was the worst thing that could happen to someone, right? Being called ma'am, which was policing and felt very misogynistic. And so that was my first example of that.
I think of how much harm, like how many layers of harm, like you talked about, like misogyny and also just like internalized trans, like so much, the gender binary, so many layers of harm. How did you even begin to have a conversation with someone that you thought was a safe person for you?
So to be honest, in that moment, I didn't. I was 19 and I was just sitting there taking, 5 minutes. And just when he was done, I kind of looked at all the other people in the room, waiting for someone to step up. And so I just didn't go again. And, I walked away feeling like I had no community. And when I look back on that moment, and the reason I brought up the sexual assault center job is that, so within a few months of living as Ethan, I was trans enough to get fired for it, but like not trans enough to be in a support group for trans people. See, I'm gonna cry too talking about this.
I think this is so, like, I thank you so much for sharing this, because you really didn't have to. You could have stuck to like, hey, my job. But I really thank you so much for sharing this, because there is so much loss that happens when you finally start stepping into what you actually need to do to live authentically. And nobody talks about the extent of it. It happens so quickly and from so many levels. And I thank you so much for talking about it. What did you do with all this loss?
Yes, so I think I went on a bit of almost a coming out tear in all of the parts of my life. In a way, just I felt very desperate to kind of sort out who's going to stay with me and who am I going to lose, and I appreciate you pointing to the extent of that. Like, if there was one good thing about those experiences, it did tell me that I needed to do this. Like if I was willing to lose my role supporting other survivors, like nothing was more important to me than that. So I had to do this. But I also, I told everyone, I came out to everyone. I also told probably way too many people about getting fired just to see if they'd take my side in that. And one nice consequence was that I did wind up building a more supportive community through that. I got kind of scooped up by this LGBTQ anti-violence org that gave me space to continue in that work and show up as myself.
What I wrote down was, you felt desperate to sort it out. And that's what it feels like, so much chaos, and you're just so desperate, like, can we, like, I know that I need to do this. I am aware that this is where I need to go, or else I could have just went back to whatever I was doing, but I am aware. But I love that the more specific you got about who you are and the work that you want to do, like, I love how that blended for you, LGBTQ violence, and just being aware of who you are and what you wanted to do has helped you to find a more specific and more supportive community. I'm really trying to get through a sentence. To the people who are feeling, I guess, desperate right now. They have had all that loss and they feel very desperate, and they're trying to get to that more specific point. What is like the first thought you want them to take away? Because there's a lot of thoughts going on. What's the first thought they should throw away?
Okay, just to clarify, you mean the first thought they should like gather and keep from this conversation, or like the first thing you should ignore and put aside?
Sorry, I'm going through this in real time right now, so there are so many thoughts going through my. I'll share like just like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should just be like, oh, just kidding. I'm I'm actually not this. And what are some of the negative thoughts, I think, that can be tossed away?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you for that question. And this is an area where I feel like I love my communities. I am grateful for the communities I'm in, but I have faced some of the worst pressure from like in-group folks. And so I think thoughts like, well, maybe I'm not ready, or maybe this isn't really who I am, or, you know, maybe he's right. If I was a real, in my case, if I was a real trans guy, I would be like him. So, I mean, I don't think you can make those thoughts not come up, right? They'll be there. People will try to push them onto you, and I would want us to be kind to ourselves. Like there's not a speed at which those are supposed to go away, and hopefully you find support and you can kind of build your own internal support so that those don't get to be the only thoughts that come to you, you know. And I just, this is another really tough one, but something, Kay, that you're making me think about, and another area where I just, like, this is the first like podcast or public setting where I felt comfortable even talking about this. So I'm just also very grateful to you for this space. But I think there is often this pressure that we place on ourselves of being sure all the time, you know, of just knowing exactly who we are and how to live authentically right away. And, you know, if that's subject to challenge or if it changes, that somehow means you're less valid than others in community. And that's another thought to throw away if you can, right? Or at least overpower with, you know, kindness and understanding to ourselves.
I'm gonna tuck that. I'm gonna keep all of this for the rest of my life. What I wrote down that I hope anybody who is crying as much as I am right now hears is there's not a speed. I think the big pressure of the community of the rainbow is the coming out. That yes. I really hate that sentiment, because even if you're not rainbow affiliated, you are still on a journey to find yourself. And there's just so much pressure if you are rainbow affiliated to like, no, like flip, you are now rainbow affiliated. You need to advocate. You need to be able to do this shit and have it down packed and be able to write articles. I remember the last conversation we had, you talked about like being very specific in the language that you use so that people cannot turn it or use it maliciously in any way whatsoever. Have you stopped doing that, or do you continue to do that?
I'd say that the being very careful is just going to continue. And where that happens a lot is in that very specific path I've carved out, right? So I did not want to leave anti-violence work. That's my home, and I've had to carve out different, I guess, different homes within, I don't know how to say this, but find other ways to be a part of that work. And, this is an area that gets tough, right? So, that person in the unsupportive support group, like found a way to both be misogynistic and tell me I was doing trans wrong at the same time. So in my work, if I'm trying to, let's say, advocate for trans or queer survivors of sexual violence, I'm always very wary that someone acting in bad faith might kind of cherry pick my writing and use that to say, hey, women, stop talking, you know? And that happens to people, right? To try to use my saying, we need all gender inclusive services, like to kind of misuse an argument like that to try to do like sexist harm in the movement. So I would say I am very, very careful in multiple dimensions, just kind of all the time around that.
And I hate that for you, and I hate that for us. I hate that there are a lot of people who just say shit and they don't give. One of the people, I mean, I don't align with him whatsoever, but I use him as an example so much whenever I'm putting out media or content. Joe Rogan, he just says shit and doesn't give a fuck
Yes.
if it's factual or. And so I'm always like, why are you afraid to put out information that's going to help people when this person doesn't give a fuck? Like, that's
He
so
does
much.
not.
You are deserving of that as well. So I try to keep that in mind, but I hate that for you, and I hate that for us, that is something that's constantly with us. Like, I have to be a great representative, or somebody
Yes.
my work that I'm trying to create safer spaces with maliciously. I hate that. What are some of the questions that you ask now when going in for support or like joining other communities, so that you're not harmed when trying to find support?
Thank you. Yeah, that's something. So I do think I'm still learning. So I would say that I'm still learning. I think that I, so I will, if I'm looking to join a space, or if I'm looking for a resource like therapy, right, or crisis support, as just as a human being myself, I will sometimes be pretty direct in asking folks kind of who their services are for, or if I'm feeling very confident, who's allowed to work somewhere, or who's welcome in a space. And something that I have started to do, I guess this is particularly if I'm looking for like formal support, so like a crisis hotline or therapy, is that I will, in my first conversation with someone, just directly tell them some of the harms I've experienced before and hear how they respond to that. So if I say, and this is another thing, yeah, long time ago, those first few years were very tough. So when I was, I guess I was in college. This was within a year or two of those other early stories. I wound up trying to pursue therapy at my university, specifically around sexual and dating violence. I don't go into detail about those experiences generally, but I will say I had unexpectedly run into a harm doer of mine, and that just activated a lot for me. And so I needed therapy. And in my intake interview, I told the person that I was transgender and would need an affirming therapist, and was immediately denied counseling. Just that was it. Like, the conversation ended. So every single provider I'm going to work with now hears that story, and I watch and listen to them react to it, which is a lot, but it's worked for me.
I'm sorry. I hate that. I hate that so much. That's such an extra step to like
Yes.
do, and then like extra harm to like have to take on from a professional. That's great. On Psychology Today, they have like profiles of like therapists, and it'll be like LGBTQ, and that's all it says. It doesn't even say like trans. It just says like LGBTQ. They need to have stuff that says like I'm transphobic. Like just put your stamp, because I don't
Yes.
want to waste your time. I don't want to be harmed more. Like this is wasting energy, my life. I need assistance and you cannot provide that. Go ahead, put your stamp up there, please.
Yeah. I want that world. I want people to just say it, and right, because, there's, right, I want the I'm transphobic stamp, and I want the, like, I mean well, but I don't know what I'm doing stamp. That's what.
Like, one of the questions that I ask whenever looking for a therapist is flat out, like, are you transphobic? And if they shuffle, whatsoever, or like, I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm not about to give you a whole webinar on what being trans means. And so you haven't even begun to like, and you're not in proximity of people like me. So I would be doing work while trying to, no, I'm good.
Yeah. And this is another area I'm realizing where the not looking for feedback comes in. What I had been thinking about when we first spoke about this, which is in therapy and other forms of healthcare, is the, right, like showing up as a survivor looking for sexual assault recovery therapy and having gender be the thing. Or, I once went to a health center with a shoulder injury and wound up taking a lot of questions about my gender transition choices and whether they were the right ones. And, again, I wish I had been badass enough in the moment to be like, I'm not looking for your opinion. But yeah, there's also because I think those people probably thought they were doing me a favor, by asking these questions and checking in on like, have I heard of hormone therapy? Or like I have, but like have I thought about looking different or making it easier for someone? And I just, all of these need to be on profiles. You're right.
I completely forgot that that's the main point of this, is like, I'm not looking for feedback. The first thought that popped in my head while you were telling that story is like, what the fuck does that have to do with my shoulder? What actual fuck does that have to do with my shoulder?
Oh yeah. It's like, well, and that's the thing I've had to learn to say. But I just, in the healthcare context, kind of like when it happens at work, is so tricky because you need something from this person, right? Like you need an assessment or you need a paycheck. So, right, I've often been like much more kind of deferential or passive, but saying things like, hey, I was wondering if we could maybe talk about my shoulder some more. Like the strongest redirect I can manage to do in those moments.
Which is still a boundary, and I applaud it, because I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing here. I'm in relationship with you for this length of time, for this whatever. Could you oscillate power with me? Because that's what you do in a relationship, via boundaries, via communicating, via whatever conversation you want to have, so we can get back on track on what this relationship is supposed to look like. When was the last time you did that small nudge of like, hey, can we talk about my shoulder? And someone was like, why would you say that?
I love that you already know that I've gotten that response. Just feel very in community. Oh God, I mean, that was definitely when a lot of medical appointments, like I normally go to an LGBT health center, but almost every time I go somewhere else, I have an encounter like that. Like I had a wisdom tooth infection a few years ago and took a lot of very invasive, way far away from my mouth body questions. And, very gently, said like, hey, I'm like really in pain. Can we talk about this? And got a response of like, well, I'm just curious. Like, what's the problem? And I will say like that's harder for me to respond to when I've like tried to redirect and it doesn't work.
I think about, I don't know why, but that made me think about being Black and like just I have had pre questionnaire type responses in my brain since like I don't even know, just like no, fuck you, and yeah. They've always seemed disrespectful, but and I think that's why with transness it also aligns. So I get that like I'm still the same like pre-designated answers to questions like no, fuck you, I'm not giving you I'm not answering that question. Do you have any like pre-designated no fuck yous in your brain that you just spit out automatically now?
So I do have a couple. I have gotten better at saying, I'm not open to discussing that with you, in some moments. That's one. And another is, this feels like it's in the same territory. So if somebody says something disrespectful, like intentionally, or just is maybe struggling with their language and uses the wrong pronoun for me or someone else, I will interrupt them. This all depends on me feeling like safe and good in the moment. I don't want to pretend that every time I do. But when I'm feeling good, I will just stop them and say, hey, I need you to do that sentence again before we can keep talking.
Damn.
Mixed reactions to that one.
That is a really, so I live with multiple mental health conditions. So I actually do ask people, can you say that again? So that's going to be a good one for me to just be like, okay, maybe I'm not understanding. Like maybe I'm like, I'll give you like 2 inches. Could you repeat what you just said again? Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So many people are going to listen to this. And because we're talking about feedback here, allow those people, like that's me giving you feedback so we can know each other. Like what you just said was way out of pocket. And I really need you to say it differently so I know what type of relationship we have here.
Yeah.
Ooh. To the people who are listening to this and thinking, you know what? I have a lot of feedback I need to give. And I have a lot of people who I no longer wish to have feedback from. What would be the top 3 tips you would share with them about having those conversations tomorrow, maybe?
Okay. So the first one might not sound as relevant to conversations, but it feels like the foundation of all of this, which is as much as you can is to just kind of trust in your sense of who you are and what you need, right? That like something I've learned a lot in trans and queer work as a like visible Jewish person in anti-violence spaces is, you can't control how people react to you. You can't control whether people believe you. And so as much as you can, if you can know that on your own and not rely on their affirmation, that's going to go a long way. So much easier to say than to do, but that I feel like is the foundation for like feeling safe to even do any of the rest of this, right? So yeah, in terms of people that so that's one. So in terms of, I guess we'll just go in the order that you said for 2 and 3. So for 2, if we're thinking, wow, there are actually a lot of people I need to give feedback to. I would say give yourself space to explore how you feel okay doing that, because and that might change. You might feel good day to day, like doing that in different ways, or long term, your way of engaging might shift. Different things might come to matter to you. So I would say give your space to explore. I this feels very much like an oldest slash kind of socially awkward sibling person. I talk on my own all the time, and like I practice conversations. So for me, that helps. Like I'll have a bad I'm sure I did it in all the stories I told you. Just I'll have a bad experience, and then I'll think, all right, next time, what do I say to that person who sucks? And I'll say it out loud till I hit something that feels good. And like I'm way better in the moment if I've done it before. That might not be what works for you or everyone else, but just, give yourself room to figure out what feels comfortable. And in terms of, I'll be very similar to that, but yeah, like, wow, there's a lot of people that I don't want to take feedback from anymore. I just take that seriously. Like, some of those people will tell you that your boundary doesn't matter, right? Or that you're like doing harm to them by advocating for yourself, and just say like trust your needs around that. I think that's 3. We'll say that's 3.
That's cool. Big 3. I love that last one because that's something my younger self was not aware of, that people will combat your boundaries with like, oh my gosh, you're attacking me, you don't care about me. I truly do care about you, and whatever you need to learn about transness, like you can do so. Here are some really great resources, but fuck alone and fix my shoulder. Like what? I'm never gonna get over that. Like I love that you said explore mediums. People are really weird about like, I still don't think you should break up with people via text message, but like that's still a medium for conversation. Like, hey, can we talk? Hey, yesterday when I'm a great writer. Conversation, not so much. I can't like I remember when I first started a job, they asked like, what would your superpower be? And my superpower would definitely be like the ability to do back and forth yo mama jokes. Cause I don't have that. I don't have like very quick comebacks like that, or very quick practice makes confidence for me a lot. So I really thank you for breaking these down to the people and for me, because I wrote all this shit down. Are there any last minute sprinkles you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't want to be too exact. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, okay? But I just want to say I'm super grateful for this space and what you do. Those are my last minute sprinkles.
It's okay. I'm so sorry to any guest who's listening to this and thinking like, okay, make sure don't tell them like they're doing a good job.
But you are.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for the kind words. And to anyone who wants to get in contact with Ethan, his information will be in the show notes. Please look them up. They share so much information. I found him because he shared about like the internalized transphobia around hair and what's expected within even the trans community. So please follow him and be ready to see amazing content. To anyone who is listening to this, keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. We will see you next time. Bye.